A flower seller saves a millionaire from an accident and he takes her to his mansion. The next morning, he's paralyzed when he sees what she did to his 8-year-old son. Olivia Reed's fingers moved with practiced ease as she arranged the tulips in the window display of her small flower shop. Morning light streamed through the glass, catching on the water droplets that clung to the petals, turning them into tiny prisms. At 25, her life had settled into a comfortable routine in Willow Creek, a town where everybody knew everyone, and change rarely came knocking. "These need to go in the cooler," she muttered to herself, gathering a bundle of white lilies. Their sweet fragrance followed her as she moved through the cramped back room of Blooming Wonders, the flower shop she'd built from nothing after dropping out of college to care for her grandmother. As if thinking about her had summoned the woman, Olivia's phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor. "Margaret's had a rough morning asking for you." Worry knotted in Olivia's stomach. The doctors had given her grandmother 6 months. That had been 8 months ago. Each day felt borrowed, precious but precarious. "Jerry," she called to her only employee, a lanky high school student who worked part-time. "Can you handle the morning rush? I need to check on Gran." Jerry gave her a thumbs up, and Olivia grabbed her purse, locking the medicine cabinet where she kept her grandmother's expensive prescriptions, the ones insurance barely covered, the ones that stretched her budget to breaking point every month. Outside, Willow Creek gleamed in the spring sunshine. The small town centered around a quaint square with a fountain where children played during summer and couples took photos in the fall. Olivia cut through the park, her mind already at home. Calculating how many pills were left in the orange bottle on the nightstand, the sound of screeching tires jerked her out of her thoughts. A sleek black sedan swerved violently on the road bordering the square, its driver seemingly fighting for control. In horrifying slow motion, Olivia watched as the car hit the curb and flipped, rolling twice before coming to rest on its roof, the metal frame crumpling like paper. For one heartbeat, the world went silent. Then Olivia was running. "Call 911!" she shouted to a stunned bystander, dropping her purse as she raced toward the wreckage. Already, flames licked at the undercarriage. Hungry and growing, people stood frozen, phones raised to record rather than help. The car's windows had shattered, and through the driver's side, Olivia could see a man hanging upside down, secured by his seatbelt, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Hey, can you hear me?" she called. Kneeling beside the window, heedless of the glass cutting into her knees, the man's eyes fluttered, unfocused. A sharp crack from the car's frame decided for her. Without hesitation, Olivia reached in to release the seatbelt, bracing herself to catch the man's weight as he fell. He was heavier than she expected, and they both tumbled backward onto the asphalt. "We need to move," she grunted, pulling at his arms. The man was beginning to regain consciousness, enough to stumble alongside her as she dragged him away from the vehicle. They had barely made it 15 feet when the car erupted in a ball of flame, the heat searing against their backs. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance as Olivia lowered the man to the grass. His expensive suit was torn and bloodied, but his breathing was steady. Up close, she could see he was older than she'd first thought, late 30s perhaps, with the kind of face that graced magazine covers and boardrooms. "You saved my life," he mumbled, gray eyes finding focus on her face. "Don't try to talk," Olivia said, tearing a strip from her shirt to press against the cut on his head. "Help is coming. Michael Whitmore," he said, as if the name should mean something, and perhaps it should have. The Whitmores owned half the county, though they rarely mingled with ordinary folks like her. "Olivia Reed?" she replied, because it seemed rude not to. His hand suddenly gripped hers with surprising strength. "My son," he started, panic flaring in his eyes. "Was there a child in the car?" Olivia's heart stuttered, her gaze darting back to the inferno. "No." Michael shook his head weakly. "At home, waiting for me." Relief washed through her, only to be replaced by a searing pain across her back. In the chaos, she hadn't noticed her own injuries, burns from the explosion, and a deep cut along her arm from the broken glass. The paramedics arrived, swarming around them, separating her from Michael Whitmore as they loaded him into an ambulance. His eyes sought hers again. "Come with me," he insisted, surprising both Olivia and the paramedic tending to him. "Please." Later, Olivia would wonder why she'd agreed. Perhaps it was shock, or the strange intensity in his gaze. Maybe it was the thought of her grandmother, who would urge her to make sure the poor man was all right. Whatever the reason, she found herself riding in the back of a sleek town car sent by the Whitmore estate, following the ambulance to the hospital, and then, incredibly, to the sprawling mansion on the hill that had always seemed like something from another world. Mrs. Hayes, the elderly housekeeper who met her at the door, took one look at Olivia's blood-stained clothes and ushered her to a bathroom larger than her entire apartment. After a shower and a change into borrowed clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent, Olivia was led through corridors lined with artwork to a sunlit sitting room where Michael Whitmore, freshly bandaged but still pale, waited. "You must think I'm insane," he said by way of greeting, gesturing for her to sit. "Dragging a stranger into my home after she's already saved my life. I was just in the right place at the right time," Olivia said, suddenly self-conscious in the opulent surroundings. "No," Michael shook his head. "Most people would have waited for the professionals. You didn't hesitate." His voice softened. "I have a son, 8 years old. If I died today..." A small sound from the doorway interrupted him. A boy with solemn eyes too old for his face stood watching them, his knuckles white where they gripped the doorframe. "Caleb," Michael's face transformed with warmth. "Come meet Miss Reed. She helped me after the accident." The boy entered, his steps silent on the thick carpet. He didn't speak, but his gaze moved between his father and Olivia with unsettling intensity. "Caleb doesn't talk much," Michael explained, something like sorrow shadowing his features. "Not since his mother's accident 3 years ago." Understanding dawned. Emma Whitmore's fatal car crash had made headlines even in Olivia's disconnected world. The boy's silence suddenly made painful sense. As if drawn by some invisible thread, Caleb crossed to Olivia and lightly touched the bandage on her arm. His eyes asked the question his voice would not. "It's just a scratch," she assured him. "I've had worse from my rose bushes." Something shifted in the boy's expression, a flicker of interest. "You garden?" Michael asked, watching the interaction with evident surprise. "I own Blooming Wonders," Olivia replied. "The flower shop in town. Roses were Emma's favorite," Michael said quietly. "We have had an extensive garden, but after," he glanced at his son, "it's fallen into disrepair." Before Olivia could respond, her phone buzzed insistently, her neighbor again, with a message that sent ice through her veins. "Doctor called. Coming by tonight. Says it's urgent." "I need to go," she said, rising abruptly. "My grandmother, she's ill," as she gathered her things, trying to ignore the panic building in her chest. Michael Whitmore made her an offer she could never have anticipated, one that would change the course of her life in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. "I'd like to hire you," Michael Whitmore said, his words stopping Olivia at the ornate doorway. She turned back, convinced she'd misheard. "Excuse me, to restore the garden," he clarified, his eyes drifting to his son. "And perhaps spend time with Caleb." The offer hung in the air between them, unexpected, almost unbelievable. Olivia's mind raced through calculations, her grandmother's mounting medical bills, the shop's thin profit margins, and the growing stack of overdue notices on her kitchen counter. "Mr. Whitmore." "Michael, please." "Michael," she corrected herself. "I have a business to run, and my grandmother needs me." His expression softened. "We can work around your schedule, and the compensation would be substantial." Substantial, the word echoed in her mind, conjuring images of paid medical bills and a proper nurse for Gran. Still, she hesitated. "Please," Michael added quietly. "You're the first person Caleb has shown interest in since..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. From the corner of her eye, Olivia caught Caleb watching her, his small face solemn yet somehow hopeful. "I'll think about it," she promised, slipping her phone into her pocket. "But right now, I really need to go." The doctor's visit confirmed what Olivia had feared. Her grandmother's condition was deteriorating rapidly. "She may have a month," Dr. Roberts said gently. "Maybe less." That night, as Olivia sat beside her grandmother's bed, Michael Whitmore's offer seemed like a lifeline thrown into stormy waters. When she finally slept, she dreamed of gardens coming back to life beneath her hands. 3 days later, she pulled her weathered pickup truck through the imposing gates of the Whitmore estate. Mrs. Hayes met her at the door, a hint of approval in her weathered face. "The master said you'd be coming," The older woman nodded. "Come along, I'll show you the garden." Garden was a generous term for the overgrown tangle behind the mansion. Once, it must have been magnificent. Stone pathways winding through carefully planned beds, a gazebo half hidden among trees, and at the center, a circular area where dead rose bushes stood like skeletal remnants of past beauty. "Mrs. Whitmore spent hours here," Mrs. Hayes said, her voice softening with memory. "Said the roses were her sanctuary." Olivia knelt, examining the dried stems. "They're not completely dead," she said, surprised. "With proper care, they might bloom again." A small sound made her turn. Caleb stood watching from the terrace, clutching a sketch pad to his chest. "Hello again," Olivia smiled, rising to dust soil from her jeans. "Would you like to help?" The boy didn't speak. She hadn't expected him to. But after a moment's hesitation, he approached, his footsteps careful on the cracked paving stones. Olivia pulled a pair of gardening gloves from her bag and handed them to him. They were comically large on his small hands, but his expression remained serious as she showed him how to clear debris from around the base of a rose bush. "Plants are a lot like people," she told him as they worked. "Sometimes they just need someone to believe they can grow again, for the briefest moment." She thought she saw the ghost of a smile touch his lips. By the end of her first week at the Whitmore estate, Olivia had established a routine: mornings at her shop, afternoons in the garden with Caleb, and evenings with her grandmother. It was exhausting, but the generous salary Michael had insisted upon meant she could finally hire a night nurse for Gran. The garden began to show signs of life. Caleb proved to be a dedicated, if silent, assistant, watching her every move with those intense eyes that seemed to absorb everything. "He's waiting for you," Mrs. Hayes said one afternoon as she brought lemonade out to the garden. "Every day he stands at that window, watching for your truck." The revelation warmed something inside Olivia. "Has he always been so quiet?" Mrs. Hayes sighed, lowering her voice though Caleb was across the garden. "Not always before Mrs. Whitmore's accident. That boy's laughter filled these halls now. It's like he's locked all his words away somewhere, even he can't find them." Olivia glanced at Caleb, who was carefully watering a newly uncovered patch of wildflowers. "What happened? To Mrs. Whitmore, I mean." A shadow passed over the housekeeper's face. "Car accident. Terrible thing. Caleb was home, but somehow, he knew. When the police came, he was already sitting on the stairs, silent as stone. Hasn't spoken a word since." That evening, as Olivia was gathering her tools to leave, she noticed Caleb had disappeared. She found him inside, standing in the main hallway, staring up at a portrait. The woman in the painting was breathtaking. Auburn hair cascading over one shoulder, her smile gentle yet somehow knowing. Emma Whitmore's eyes seemed to follow Olivia as she approached, an unsettling sensation of recognition washing over her. "She was beautiful," Olivia said softly. Caleb nodded, still looking up at his mother's face. "You have her eyes," Olivia added, seeing the resemblance in the shape and color, if not yet in the warmth the portrait captured. The boy turned to her then, something like surprise in his expression. He pulled his ever-present sketchbook from under his arm and opened it, showing her a drawing of the garden. In the center, where the roses would eventually bloom, he'd drawn two figures, a small boy and a woman with flowing hair the color of Olivia's own. "Is that me?" she asked, touched by the childish rendering. Caleb nodded, then pointed to another page. This one showed the same woman, clearly meant to be Olivia, touching a dead rose bush. From her fingertips, he'd drawn swirls of color spreading into the plant, bringing it back to life. "You're very talented," she told him, genuinely impressed by the emotional quality in his simple drawings, and optimistic about my gardening skills. For just an instant, his mouth quirked upward. Not quite a smile, but close. That night, her grandmother was lucid, a rare gift these days. Olivia sat beside her bed, recounting her day at the Whitmore estate. "Roses coming back from the dead," Gran mused, her voice thin but clear. "Life finds a way, doesn't it?" "It does," Olivia agreed, adjusting the older woman's blanket. Olivia, Gran's hand, papery and frail, caught hers with surprising strength. "There's something I need to tell you." Something in her tone made Olivia's heart skip. "What is it?" Gran's eyes, clouded with cataracts but suddenly intense, fixed on her face. You weren't born here in Willow Creek. I know that, Olivia said gently. You took me in when I was a baby, after my mother died. Your mother didn't die. Not then. Gran's grip tightened. She left you with me. For safekeeping, she said. The world seemed to tilt beneath Olivia. What? Her name was Julia Harper, Gran continued, each word deliberate. She worked as a maid for a wealthy family. Got herself in trouble somehow. She was so frightened, poor thing. A wealthy family, Olivia repeated, a chill running through her. Which family? I never asked, Gran said, but her eyes slid away. Better not to know sometimes. Gran, Olivia pressed, a suspicion forming. Was it the Whitmores? The old woman's silence was answer enough. Why didn't you tell me this before? Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She made me promise, Gran said, her eyes drifting closed. Said she'd come back for you when it was safe, but she never did. As her grandmother slipped back into sleep, Olivia sat frozen, the implications swirling through her mind. The strange familiarity she'd felt seeing Emma Whitmore's portrait. The immediate connection with Caleb. The way the estate had seemed to call to something deep within her from the moment she'd arrived. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the window like a whispered secret finally finding its voice. The morning after her grandmother's revelation, Olivia arrived at the Whitmore estate with her mind churning. Every architectural detail, every family photograph she passed seemed to hold potential clues to her origins. Had her mother walked these same halls? Had she polished these same banisters and dusted these same shelves? You look like you've seen a ghost, Mrs. Hayes commented, finding Olivia staring at a collection of staff photographs in a forgotten hallway. Olivia startled. Just admiring the history, she said, trying to sound casual. How long have you worked here, Mrs. Hayes? Longer than I care to admit, the older woman chuckled. Going on 40 years now. Served the senior Mr. Whitmore before Michael was even born. 40 years, if her calculations were right. That would mean Mrs. Hayes had been here when Julia Harper worked in the mansion, when Olivia herself might have been conceived. Did you know all the staff? Olivia asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Over the years, I mean. Mrs. Hayes gave her a curious look. Most of them, yes. Why do you ask? Before Olivia could formulate a response, the patter of small feet saved her. Caleb appeared, dressed in clothes too formal for a child his age, pressed khakis and a button-down shirt, as if he were headed to Sunday school instead of a gardening session. Good morning, Olivia smiled, grateful for the interruption. Ready to get dirty? For answer. Caleb held up a small trowel he'd clearly been keeping behind his back. The ghost of excitement in his eyes made Olivia's heart squeeze. I'll leave you two to it, Mrs. Hayes said, her suspicious gaze lingering on Olivia a moment longer before she turned away. In the garden, Olivia found herself watching Caleb with new eyes. If her mother had indeed worked for the Whitmores, could there be some connection between them? The thought seemed far-fetched, yet the coincidences were mounting. Her inexplicable familiarity with Emma's portrait, Caleb's immediate acceptance of her, even her own mysterious draw to this place. You're doing great with that compost, she told him, pushing the thoughts aside to focus on the boy carefully mixing soil in a wheelbarrow. The roses will love all those nutrients. Caleb beamed at the praise, his hands working with surprising competence for a child his age, in the 2 weeks she'd been coming to the estate. He'd proven to be not only attentive but naturally gifted with plants. Like me, she couldn't help thinking. As they worked, she found herself telling him about different plants, about photosynthesis and root systems, and the language of flowers. He never responded verbally, but his eyes, so alert, so hungry for information, told her he was absorbing every word. My mother taught me all this, she explained, as they transplanted seedlings into freshly turned soil. Well, not my birth mother, the woman who raised me. Caleb looked up, a question in his expression. I was adopted, Olivia clarified, the word feeling strange on her tongue after years of thinking of Gran simply as family. I just found out my birth mother used to work in a house like this one. Something flickered in the boy's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding of what it meant to have pieces of your history missing. Hey, you two, a deep voice called from the terrace. They both turned to see Michael Whitmore watching them, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. in jeans and a casual button-down with the sleeves rolled up. He looked younger, less burdened than he had in their previous encounters. "Dad?" Caleb's reaction was immediate. Dropping his trowel, he ran to his father, wrapping his arms around Michael's waist in a gesture so normal, so boyish that it made Olivia's throat tighten. "I see you've put my son to work," Michael said, his hand resting on Caleb's shoulder with easy affection. "He's a natural," Olivia replied, rising to dust off her knees. "We've been discussing the finer points of compost ratios." "Fascinating," Michael grinned, but his eyes held genuine warmth as he looked down at his son. "Why don't you go inside and clean up? I need to talk to Miss Reed." Caleb hesitated, looking between them. "It's okay," Olivia assured him. "I'll still be here when you get back." After the boy reluctantly retreated inside, Michael descended the stone steps into the garden. Surveying the transformation already underway, where tangled weeds had choked paths and strangled ornamental plants, order was beginning to emerge. The central rose garden remained a work in progress, but the bones of something beautiful were visible now. "It's remarkable," he said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "What you've accomplished in such a short time. The structure was always here," Olivia pointed out. "It just needed someone to care for it again." He nodded, his eyes lingering on the roses. "Emma would have loved what you're doing." The mention of his late wife created an opening Olivia couldn't resist. Mrs. Hayes mentioned she died in a car accident. Pain flashed across Michael's face, but he nodded. 3 years ago, black ice on Ridgeway Pass. They said she died instantly. His voice dropped. "I keep telling myself that's a mercy." "I'm so sorry," she said, meaning it, whatever secrets this house held. Whatever connection she might have to it, the grief in this man's eyes was real and raw. Caleb was supposed to be with her that day. He continued, his gaze distant. He had a cold, so Emma left him with Mrs. Hayes while she went to a charity meeting when the police came. He stopped, swallowing hard. He hasn't spoken since, not a single word. Olivia's heart ached for both of them. "Sometimes," she ventured, "silence is the only way we know how to hold our pain." Michael looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing past the dirt-smudged gardener to something underneath. "You speak from experience." She shrugged, uncomfortable under the intensity of his gaze. "We all have our ghosts." A comfortable silence settled between them. In the distance, birds called to each other from the estate's ancient oaks. "I came to ask you a favor, actually," Michael said finally. "I have a business trip tomorrow, just overnight. Normally, Mrs. Hayes stays with Caleb, but her sister's ill, and she's asked for time off. You want me to stay with him?" Olivia guessed, surprised at the level of trust implied. "If you're willing, you'd be compensated, of course." The opportunity was too perfect. A night in the house with access to records. Photographs? Anything that might shed light on Julia Harper's time here? "Of course," she agreed. "My neighbor can check on my grandmother." Relief crossed his features. "Thank you, Caleb. He trusts you. That's rare these days." As if the mention of his name had summoned him, Caleb reappeared on the terrace. Hands and face freshly washed, eyes questioning. "Miss Reed is going to stay with you tomorrow night while I'm away," Michael explained. The boy's entire demeanor brightened, and he rushed back down to the garden, tugging at Olivia's hand and pointing toward the house. "I think he wants to show you something," Michael laughed, the sound transforming his face. Caleb led her through French doors into a sunroom filled with light. In one corner stood an upright piano, its wood gleaming with polish. "Do you play?" Olivia asked, surprised. Caleb shook his head, then pointed at her. "Me? No, I never learned," looking disappointed. The boy opened the bench seat and pulled out a yellowed book of sheet music. On the cover, written in flowing script, was the name, Emma Whitmore. "That was your mother's?" Olivia asked softly. Caleb nodded, then carefully, reverently, placed the book back in the bench. "He wanted to share her with you," Michael said from the doorway, something unreadable in his expression. "He doesn't do that with just anyone." That evening, as Olivia was preparing to leave, Mrs. Hayes approached her in the hallway, her manner brisk but her eyes searching. "I found this," she said, pressing a small leather-bound book into Olivia's hands. "In the old staff records. Thought you might find it interesting." Before Olivia could respond, the older woman had disappeared down a corridor. Opening the book, Olivia found pages of staff names, dates of employment, and positions held. A single entry was circled in faded red ink. Harper, Julia, lady's maid to Mrs. Emma Whitmore. Employed June 1998, December 1999. Left without notice. Below the entry, a handwritten note in the same red ink. RM 212 East Wing. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. Lady's maid to Emma Whitmore. Not just any position in the household, but one that would have put her mother in close daily contact with Michael's late wife. Employed until December 1999, and Olivia had been born in August 2000. The timing fit perfectly with her grandmother's story. As she slipped the book into her bag, a voice called her name, making her jump. Michael stood at the end of the hallway, a smile warming his features. "See you tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow," she confirmed, acutely aware of the book's weight against her side and the invisible threads of the past that seemed to be drawing tighter around her with each passing day. The following evening, Olivia parked her truck in front of the mansion, a small overnight bag on the passenger seat. After checking on her grandmother and briefing the night nurse, she'd spent hours poring over the staff ledger Mrs. Hayes had given her, searching for any additional mention of Julia Harper. There was nothing beyond that single entry and the mysterious room number. Michael greeted her at the door, dressed in a tailored suit that reminded her of their vast social differences. "Thank you again for doing this," he said, ushering her inside. "My flight leaves in 2 hours." "It's no problem," Olivia assured him, trying not to stare at how the charcoal gray fabric accentuated his shoulders. "Caleb and I will be fine." On cue, the boy appeared at the top of the grand staircase, his face lighting up when he saw her. He hurried down, a book clutched to his chest. "I think he's been waiting by the window since lunch," Michael said, his voice low enough that only Olivia could hear. "He's excited about your sleepover." Caleb tugged at her hand, clearly eager to show her something. "Let me say goodbye to your dad first," she told him gently. Michael knelt to embrace his son. "Be good for Miss Reed," he said, pressing a kiss to the boy's forehead. "I'll be back tomorrow afternoon." As Michael left, Olivia felt a strange mixture of anticipation and guilt. She was genuinely fond of Caleb, but she couldn't deny that part of her saw this overnight stay as an opportunity to search for answers about her mother. Caleb led her upstairs to his bedroom, a space that reflected both childhood and privilege. Model airplanes hung from the ceiling, and shelves lined one wall, filled with books and intricate Lego creations. But there were no action figures or sports equipment, none of the cheerful mess she associated with 8-year-old boys. "This is nice," she said, settling on the edge of his neatly made bed. Caleb opened the book he'd been carrying, a photo album. The first page showed a younger Emma Whitmore holding a newborn Caleb, her face radiant with maternal joy. "Your mom was beautiful," Olivia said softly. Caleb nodded, turning pages slowly. Each photo told a story of a happy family. Birthday parties, Christmases, beach vacations. In every image, Emma's love for her son was palpable. The final pictures were from what appeared to be Caleb's 5th birthday. After that, the pages remained empty. "Thank you for sharing these with me," Olivia said, her throat tight with emotion. The boy closed the album carefully, then pointed to his digital clock. 6:30. "Dinner time," Olivia guessed. He nodded emphatically. Mrs. Hayes had left a lasagna for them, with instructions for heating it scrawled in her precise handwriting. As they ate in the massive dining room, Olivia felt ridiculous at one end of a table clearly designed for large dinner parties. She couldn't help wondering if her mother had served meals in this very room. "After dinner," she said, trying to sound casual, "would you mind showing me around the house a bit more? I've only seen the garden and a few rooms downstairs." Caleb considered this, then nodded, his eyes bright with the idea of playing tour guide. The tour began innocently enough. Caleb showed her the media room with its enormous projection screen, the library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a surprisingly cozy sunroom overlooking the garden. But Olivia was waiting for an opportunity to investigate the East Wing, where room 212 was located. Her chance came when Caleb's attention was caught by a chess set in the library. "Why don't you set it up?" she suggested. "I need to use the restroom. I'll be right back." The moment she stepped into the hallway, guilt washed over her. She was essentially using Caleb's trust to snoop around his home. Still, the need to know drove her forward, through a set of heavier doors and into what was clearly the older section of the house. The east wing had a different feel. The carpet runner more worn, the wallpaper slightly faded. Unlike the rest of the house, which had been modernized while maintaining its historical character, this section felt genuinely antique. Room 212 was at the end of a long corridor. The door was unlocked, opening to reveal what had once been servants' quarters. A narrow bed, a simple dresser, and a small desk beneath a window overlooking the back gardens. The room appeared unused now, a layer of dust covering every surface. Olivia moved quickly, opening drawers and checking under the mattress. Nothing. The closet held only empty hangers and a cardboard box labeled Christmas decorations. Disappointed, she was about to leave when she noticed a loose floorboard near the desk. Kneeling, she pried it up with her fingernails to reveal a small hollow space. Inside was a yellowed envelope addressed to "My dearest Jay." Her hands trembling, Olivia withdrew a letter written on expensive stationery. "My dearest Jay, I cannot express how much your friendship has meant during these difficult months. Michael is consumed with the company, and some days I feel more like a possession than a wife. Your kindness has been my lifeline. I worry about you. The bruises on your wrist. Don't tell me you bumped into a door again. We both know that's not true. If someone is hurting you, please tell me. I can help. With love." Emma Olivia stared at the letter, her mind racing. Emma Whitmore had been friends with her mother, not just employer and employee, but genuine friends, and someone had been hurting Julia, leaving bruises. But who and what had happened to drive her away from the estate, pregnant and afraid? "What are you doing in here?" The sharp voice made Olivia whirl around, instinctively hiding the letter behind her back. A tall woman stood in the doorway, her expensive blouse and tailored pants a stark contrast to the dusty room. Though Olivia had never met her, she recognized Diane Whitmore from photographs in Michael's study, his older sister, who ran the family business. I was looking for the bathroom," Olivia stammered, knowing how pathetic the excuse sounded. Diane's eyes narrowed. "In the old servants' quarters. Try again." "I got lost," Olivia amended, slowly getting to her feet. "The house is huge, and you decided to search through an empty room." Diane's gaze dropped to Olivia's hand, still concealing the letter. "What have you found?" "Nothing," Olivia said too quickly. "Just dusty furniture." "Show me your hands." "Ms. Whitmore, Now, reluctantly, Olivia brought her hands forward, the letter clearly visible. Diane snatched it from her grasp, her face hardening as she scanned the contents. "Where did you find this?" "Under a floorboard," Olivia admitted, seeing no point in lying. "What are you really doing here?" Diane's voice was cold. "First you ingratiate yourself with my brother after his accident, then with his traumatized son, and now I find you snooping through private correspondence." "It's not what you think," Olivia began. But Diane cut her off. "I know exactly what it is. You're after the Whitmore fortune. You wouldn't be the first pretty young thing to try." The accusation was so far from Olivia's actual motives that she almost laughed. "I'm not after anyone's money, I'm just looking for information about someone who used to work here." "Who?" Olivia hesitated. "Julia Harper." Something flickered in Diane's eyes. Recognition, and something else. Fear. Why? Before Olivia could decide how much to reveal, a small figure appeared in the doorway behind Diane. Caleb stood frozen, his eyes wide as they moved between the two women. "Caleb?" Diane's tone softened marginally. "Go back downstairs, the adults are talking." But the boy didn't move. Instead, he came to stand beside Olivia, his small hand finding hers in a gesture of silent solidarity. Diane's lips pressed into a thin line. "My brother may be blinded by whatever act you're putting on, but I'm not. Stay away from the East Wing. Stay away from old family business, and most importantly, stay away from my nephew." With that, she turned on her heel and stalked out, taking Emma's letter with her. Olivia let out a shaky breath, looking down at Caleb. "I'm sorry you had to see that." For answer, he tugged her hand, leading her back through the corridors toward the main part of the house. In the library, the chess game sat forgotten, but Caleb bypassed it, taking her instead to a built-in cabinet she hadn't noticed before. Opening it revealed a small safe, To Olivia's astonishment, the boy spun the dial with practiced movements. The safe clicked open, and he withdrew a leather-bound journal with Emma embossed on the cover in gold leaf. "Your mother's diary," Olivia whispered, stunned that he would share something so personal. Caleb nodded, pressing it into her hands with the solemnity that belied his years. "Are you sure?" she asked, overwhelmed by the trust this represented. His nod was decisive. As she accepted the journal, Olivia realized she had found an unexpected ally in her search for the truth, a silent child with observant eyes and, it seemed, secrets of his own. Long after Caleb had fallen asleep, Olivia sat in the guest room, Emma Whitmore's journal open on her lap. She'd been reading for hours, immersed in the private thoughts of a woman she'd never met but who now seemed intimately familiar. The early entries painted a picture of a privileged but lonely existence. Emma had married Michael young. She was barely 22 when they wed, and struggled to find her place in the Whitmore dynasty. Diane, 7 years her senior, had never fully accepted her. April 12, 1998. Diane made another comment about my decorative function at the charity gala. Michael didn't notice. Of course, sometimes I think he sees me as just another beautiful acquisition, like the paintings he collects or the cars he drives. I'm suffocating in this house. Then, in June, the tone changed. June 28, 1998. Mrs. Hayes hired a new lady's maid for me today, Julia Harper. She's quiet, but there's something refreshing about her honesty. When I asked her opinion on a dress, she actually told me the truth instead of empty flattery. I think I might like her. Olivia's heart skipped at the first mention of her mother's name. As the entries continued, it became clear that Emma and Julia had developed a genuine friendship, unusual for their respective positions. September 14, 1998. Julia caught me crying in the garden today. I couldn't explain about the tests, about the doctors saying I might never conceive. She didn't press, just sat with me. Later, she brought me tea with honey and a wildflower she'd found by the gazebo. "Even in the smallest spaces," she said, "beauty finds a way to grow." I think she meant it as comfort for more than just my barren garden. Olivia paused, absorbing this new information. Emma had struggled with infertility before eventually having Caleb, and her mother had been a source of comfort during that difficult time. She flipped forward, scanning entries until one caught her eye, December 3, 1998. Something is wrong with Julia. She won't tell me, but I see the fear in her eyes. The bruises on her wrists have gotten worse. When I pressed her today, she finally admitted someone in the house has been hurting her. She wouldn't say who. But I have my suspicions. If I'm right, there will be hell to pay. The next several entries showed Emma's growing concern, her attempts to protect Julia from someone she never directly named. Then, abruptly, January 10th, 1999. Julia disappeared last night. All her things are gone from her room. Mrs. Hayes found the resignation letter this morning, but I know Julia would never leave without saying goodbye to me. Something happened. I fear the worst. Olivia's hand trembled as she turned the page, but the next entry was dated nearly 6 months later, July 2nd, 1999. A miracle, Dr. Brenner called today. After all the treatments, all the disappointments, I'm pregnant. Michael is ecstatic. Even Diane seemed genuinely pleased. I keep thinking of Julia, how she would have celebrated with me. I still search for her every time I go into town. Where are you, my friend? The remaining entries chronicled Emma's pregnancy and Caleb's early years. Olivia searched for any further mention of Julia, but found nothing until a curious entry dated just 2 weeks before Emma's death. February 12, 2022, I found discrepancies in the foundation accounts, large sums diverted to offshore holdings. When I questioned Dee about it, she became defensive, almost threatening. I need to gather more evidence before I take this to Michael. I will not let the foundation that bears our name be used for fraud. The entry ended there. The next page had been torn out. Olivia stared at the jagged edge, a chill running through her. Had Emma discovered something that led to her death? And what had happened to her mother in those missing months between her disappearance from the Whitmore estate and Olivia's birth? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She quickly closed the journal and opened the door to find Caleb, pale-faced in dinosaur pajamas, tears streaming silently down his cheeks. "Hey," she said softly, kneeling to his level. "Bad dream." He nodded, rubbing his eyes with small fists. "Want to talk about it?" she asked automatically, then winced at her thoughtlessness. Sorry, do you want to stay with me for a bit? Caleb nodded again, slipping his hand into hers. Olivia led him to the window seat, where they sat together looking out at the moonlit garden. After a while, his breathing steadied, and he leaned against her shoulder, a warm weight that felt surprisingly right. You know, she said quietly, when I was little and had nightmares, my gran would tell me to imagine planting a garden of good thoughts. That way, when the scary ones came, I had something beautiful to focus on instead. Caleb looked up at her curiously. Let's try it, she suggested. I'll close my eyes and imagine planting something good. You do the same. She closed her eyes, feeling Caleb mimic her. I'm planting sunflowers, she murmured. Tall and bright and always turning toward the light. After a moment, she felt a tugging on her sleeve. Caleb pointed to himself, then made a gesture like a blooming flower. You're planting flowers too, she guessed. He nodded enthusiastically, then made another gesture, hands forming a circle. Round flowers, Olivia tried. Roses. Caleb's face lit up, and he nodded again. Blue, he whispered. The word so soft, Olivia almost missed it. She froze, staring at the boy who had just broken 3 years of silence. What did you say? Blue roses, he repeated, his voice rusty from disuse but unmistakable. Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes. Caleb, you're talking. He looked as shocked as she felt, his hand flying to his throat. Then, slowly, he smiled. A real smile that transformed his solemn face into that of the child he truly was. Blue roses don't exist in nature, Olivia told him gently, still reeling from the miracle of his speech. They're impossible. You could make them, he said, each word careful and deliberate, as if he were remembering how language worked. In the garden, the simple faith in his voice undid her. I could try, she agreed, pulling him into a spontaneous hug that he returned with surprising fierceness. Later, after Caleb had fallen asleep in his own bed, Olivia stood at the window, looking out at the garden where the rose bushes were just beginning to show new growth. Blue roses, a botanical impossibility, yet somehow the perfect symbol for what was happening in this house. New life emerging from dormancy, the impossible becoming possible. She thought of her mother, pregnant and alone, fleeing from someone who had hurt her, of Emma Whitmore, who had tried to protect her and who might have died because of financial discrepancies she'd discovered, of Diane's cold eyes when she'd found Olivia with the letter. Tomorrow Michael would return, and Olivia would need to decide how much to tell him, about Caleb speaking again, about Emma's journal and the torn page, about her own connection to this house through a mother she'd never known. In the moonlight, the garden seemed to shimmer with potential, like a promise waiting to be kept, or a secret on the verge of revelation. By mid-April, the garden had undergone a remarkable transformation, where weeds and brambles had choked the pathways. Neat gravel walkways now curved between beds of spring bulbs and flowering shrubs. The central rose garden was still a work in progress, but the bushes were leafing out vigorously, promising abundant blooms by summer. Caleb, since breaking his silence that night, had begun speaking more regularly, though still only to Olivia and, occasionally, his father. The change in him was dramatic. Color in his cheeks, animation in his face, a lightness in his step that hadn't been there before. You've worked a miracle, Michael told Olivia one afternoon, as they watched Caleb carefully pruning a rose bush under Mrs. Hayes's supervision. The garden, Caleb. Everything is coming back to life. Plants just need the right conditions to thrive, Olivia said, though she knew he wasn't really talking about the gardening. So do people. Michael's hand brushed against hers on the stone balustrade, the contact brief but electric. I don't know how to thank you. She turned to face him, startled by the emotion in his eyes. You don't need to thank me. I enjoy being here. It was true, despite the complications, despite Diane's hostility during her increasingly frequent visits, despite the mystery still surrounding her mother's time in this house. Still, Michael said, his voice dropping lower, I'd like to try. Before she could respond, he leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle, questioning pressure that sent warmth flooding through her. For a moment, she let herself lean into him, before reality reasserted itself, and she pulled away, "Michael, I'm sorry," he said immediately, stepping back. "That was inappropriate." "No," she found herself saying, surprising them both. "It wasn't inappropriate, it's just complicated, confusing, possibly connected to secrets neither of them fully understood." In the garden below, Caleb looked up, waving excitedly at something he'd discovered. The moment broke, but the warmth remained, a new dimension to the already complex web of feelings connecting Olivia to this house and its inhabitants, and in a small greenhouse behind the kitchen, hidden from casual view. Experimental rose cuttings soaked in a solution Olivia had developed, her attempt to create the impossible blue roses Caleb had asked for, a symbol of new beginnings and impossible dreams coming true. "Are you certain it was an accident?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper despite the fact that they were alone in Mrs. Hayes's small sitting room at the back of the mansion, the elderly housekeeper's hands stilled on her teacup. Outside, rain lashed against the windows, creating a curtain of white noise that ensured their conversation remained private. "I've worked for this family for 4 decades, Mrs. Hayes said carefully. "I've never spoken ill of any Whitmore." "I'm not asking you to," Olivia clarified. "I'm asking if you had doubts about Emma's accident." Mrs. Hayes studied her for a long moment. "Why are you so interested in old tragedies, Miss Reed?" Olivia hesitated. She'd been careful not to reveal her connection to Julia Harper, unsure whom to trust with that information, but Mrs. Hayes had already helped her once, providing the staff ledger with her mother's room number. "I have reason to believe my mother worked here," she finally admitted, "as Emma's lady's maid, Julia Harper." Recognition flickered in the housekeeper's eyes. "The girl who disappeared." "She didn't disappear," Olivia said. "She left because she was pregnant with me." Mrs. Hayes set down her teacup, her weathered face showing no surprise. "I suspected as much. From the moment you arrived, you have her eyes. You knew my mother." "Not well," she kept to herself. "Except with Mrs. Whitmore," the older woman hesitated. "They were close. Closer than was proper, some might say. Emma's journal mentioned that someone was hurting my mother. Do you know who?" Mrs. Hayes's gaze slid away. "There were rumors, nothing concrete." "Please," Olivia pressed. "I need to understand what happened here." After a long pause, Mrs. Hayes sighed. "I found her once, crying in the laundry room. Her wrist was bruised black and blue. When I asked who'd done it, she just shook her head and said it would only make things worse if she told. But you had suspicions." "It wasn't Mr. Whitmore, if that's what you're thinking," Mrs. Hayes said firmly. He barely noticed the staff back then, too wrapped up in the business and in trying to please his new wife. "Then who?" Before the housekeeper could answer, the door opened and Caleb burst in, soaked from the rain and clutching a muddy object. "Caleb Whitmore," Mrs. Hayes exclaimed, momentarily distracted from their conversation. "Look at the state of you." "I found something," the boy said, his voice still halting but growing stronger with each passing day. He held out his hands to reveal a small metal box, caked with soil. "Where did you find this?" Olivia asked, taking the box carefully. "By the gazebo," Caleb explained. The rain washed away the dirt. The box was locked, but the years underground had weakened the metal. With careful pressure, Olivia was able to pry it open. Inside, protected by a waterproof bag, was a small notebook and what appeared to be financial documents. "Those look like foundation papers," Mrs. Hayes murmured, peering over Olivia's shoulder. Olivia's pulse quickened as she examined the notebook. The handwriting matched Emma's journal, delicate but precise. Flipping through the pages, she found entries documenting financial transfers, dates, and amounts. Alongside notes expressing growing concern, Diane transferred $250,000 to Cayman account today. Board never approved this. Third such transfer in 2 months. Confronted Dee about missing funds. She claims they're for a special project, but won't provide details. Something isn't right. Found evidence of at least $2 diverted from Children's Hospital Wing Fund. Must tell Michael. The final entry was dated February 18th, 2022, the day Emma died, meeting with auditor canceled. Dee claims he's ill, taking documentation to Michael directly tonight. Can't wait any longer. Olivia felt a chill run through her. "Mrs. Hayes," she said slowly, Do you remember if Diane was here the day of Emma's accident? The housekeeper frowned. She was supposed to be in New York, but now that you mention it, I saw her car in the driveway that morning. I remember thinking it was odd, since she'd made such a fuss about having to be at the Manhattan office. Caleb, who had been listening quietly, suddenly tugged at Olivia's sleeve. Aunt Diane was in the garage, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Before Mommy left, Olivia and Mrs. Hayes exchanged alarmed glances. You saw her? Olivia asked carefully. Caleb nodded, his eyes taking on the haunted look that had become less frequent in recent weeks. She was under Mommy's car. I was getting my dinosaur from the back seat. She didn't see me. Oh my God, Mrs. Hayes breathed, one hand going to her heart. Caleb, Olivia asked, keeping her voice gentle despite her racing pulse. Did you tell anyone about this before? He shook his head. I was scared. And then Mommy was gone. And I couldn't. His voice cracked, and tears filled his eyes. Olivia pulled him into a hug, her mind reeling from the implications. If what Caleb was saying was true, then Emma's accident had been no accident at all, and Diane Whitmore was responsible. We need to tell your father, she said, pulling back to look at Caleb. Do you think you can be brave and tell him what you just told us? Fear flashed across the boy's face. What if Aunt Diane hurts him too? We won't let that happen, Olivia promised, though she had no idea how to keep such a promise against someone as powerful and apparently ruthless as Diane. Mrs. Hayes stood abruptly. Mr. Whitmore is at a board meeting in the city. Miss Diane is there too. They won't be back until tonight. That gives us time to figure out our next steps, Olivia said, carefully returning the documents to the metal box. We need to keep these safe. A sudden noise from the hallway made them all freeze. The front door had opened, followed by the sound of heels clicking on marble. Diane, Mrs. Hayes whispered, her face paling. She's supposed to be in the city with Mr. Whitmore. Caleb, Diane's voice called from the foyer. Mrs. Hayes, take the boy upstairs, Olivia whispered urgently to Mrs. Hayes. I'll deal with her. Be careful, the housekeeper warned, ushering Caleb toward the back stairs. If what we suspect is true, Olivia slipped the metal box under a cushion just as Diane appeared in the doorway, impeccably dressed and looking mildly annoyed. Where is everyone? She demanded, then registered Olivia's presence with evident displeasure. Oh, you're here. Miss Whitmore, Olivia acknowledged, trying to appear calm despite her hammering heart. I didn't expect you today. Clearly, Diane replied coolly. Meeting ended early. Where's my nephew? With Mrs. Hayes, Olivia said, standing to create distance between Diane and the hidden box. Getting cleaned up. He was playing in the rain. Diane's gaze swept the room, lingering suspiciously on the cushions of the sofa. What are you doing in here? This isn't part of your gardening territory. The rain drove us inside, Olivia explained, gesturing to the window where water still streamed down the glass. Mrs. Hayes was kind enough to offer tea. Diane stepped further into the room, her movements deliberately slow, almost predatory. You've become quite comfortable in this house, haven't you? First my brother, then my nephew. Now the staff quarters. Wherever you go, you seem to be digging. There was something dangerous in her tone that made Olivia's skin prickle with alarm. I'm just doing the job Michael hired me for, she said, edging toward the door. Speaking of which, I should check on the greenhouse. The seedlings need attention. Seedlings, Diane repeated, a cold smile playing at her lips. Always nurturing something, aren't you? But some things shouldn't be allowed to grow. The threat, though veiled, was unmistakable. Olivia forced herself to meet Diane's gaze steadily, refusing to show fear. Nature finds a way, she replied, even in the harshest conditions. Nature can be controlled, Diane countered. Pruned, uprooted when necessary. They stared at each other, the pretense of polite conversation evaporating. I wonder, Diane said finally, if you've ever considered how precarious your position here is. One word from me to Michael about your snooping, and you'd be gone. Is that what happened to my mother? Olivia asked before she could stop herself. One word from you, and she was gone. Diane's expression flickered, genuine surprise breaking through her composed facade. Your mother, Julia Harper, Olivia clarified, watching carefully for a reaction. Something dark crossed Diane's features. "Julia Harper has nothing to do with you. She has everything to do with me," Olivia countered. "She was my mother." For the briefest moment, Diane seemed thrown off balance. Then her eyes narrowed. "If that's true, and I'm not saying it is, then you need to understand something. Julia Harper was a thief and a liar. She betrayed this family's trust. Whatever story you've concocted about her, I suggest you forget it, for your own good." "Is that a threat?" Diane stepped closer, her perfume, something expensive and suffocating, enveloping Olivia. "Consider it friendly advice. There are things you don't understand, things better left buried, like your mother." The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. "What do you mean, buried?" But Diane had already turned away, moving toward the door. "I'll be staying overnight. Business to attend to. Tell Mrs. Hayes to prepare my usual room." As Diane's footsteps receded down the hallway, Olivia sank onto the sofa, her legs suddenly weak. The confrontation had confirmed her worst fears. Diane knew something about her mother's fate, something ominous. And now, with the evidence Caleb had uncovered, Olivia was certain of one thing: Diane Whitmore was capable of murder. The rain continued to pour outside, beating against the window like a warning. Caleb's 9th birthday arrived with perfect May weather, sunshine dappling through the newly leafed trees and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of early blooms across the estate. In the weeks since discovering Emma's hidden records, Olivia had been caught in an excruciating dilemma: reveal everything to Michael and risk Diane taking preemptive action, or gather more definitive proof before coming forward. She'd chosen the latter path, keeping the metal box hidden in her apartment while meticulously photographing its contents. Mrs. Hayes had sworn secrecy, though her worried glances whenever Diane visited the estate spoke volumes about her fear. "The roses are starting to form buds," Michael observed as they walked through the garden, now transformed beyond recognition. What had been a tangled, neglected space 3 months ago was now a carefully planned paradise of spring blooms, with the promise of summer's display to come. "They'll be spectacular in another few weeks," Olivia agreed, hyper-aware of his presence beside her, of the careful distance he'd maintained since their kiss on the terrace. Just in time for the party, Caleb had requested a garden party for his birthday, his first real celebration since Emma's death. Michael had embraced the idea with enthusiasm that bordered on desperation, as if trying to make up for 3 years of silent grief in a single afternoon. "I've invited the board members and their families," he continued, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture Olivia had come to recognize. "Diane thinks it's a good opportunity to show them the Foundation's progress." The mention of Diane sent a chill through Olivia, despite the warm sun. Since their confrontation, Michael's sister had been disturbingly pleasant, offering suggestions for the garden and bringing expensive gifts for Caleb. The sudden change in behavior only heightened Olivia's suspicion that Diane was planning something. "Speaking of Diane," Michael added, "she suggested we might use some of the Foundation's discretionary budget to expand the garden project. Maybe add a children's area with plantings Caleb could oversee." "That's generous of her," Olivia managed, hiding her surprise. Diane Whitmore, voluntarily directing money toward something Olivia was involved with. It made no sense. "She's really come around," Michael said, his relief palpable. "I think seeing Caleb happy again has softened her." Olivia doubted that very much, but she simply nodded, unwilling to shatter his newfound peace. Every instinct told her Diane was setting a trap, but without concrete proof of her involvement in Emma's death, Olivia had no grounds to voice her suspicions. "Olivia," Caleb's voice rang out from the greenhouse where they'd been working on a special project. "Come quick." They hurried toward the small structure, where Caleb stood beaming beside the experimental roses Olivia had been cultivating for months. "Look," he exclaimed, pointing to a half-opened bud. It worked. Michael let out a low whistle as he peered at the flower. Through careful grafting, specialized nutrients, and a pH-altering solution, Olivia had achieved what many considered horticulturally impossible: a rose with petals of true blue, the color of a summer sky. "I've never seen anything like it," Michael murmured, his eyes wide with wonder. "Blue roses," Caleb said proudly, "just like I asked for. They're not supposed to exist," Olivia explained, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. In flower language, blue roses symbolize the impossible becoming possible. How appropriate, Michael said softly, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. You've brought the impossible to life in more ways than one. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Then Caleb tugged at his father's hand. Can we put them in the middle of the party? He asked, so everyone can see. Of course, Michael agreed, breaking the tension. They'll be the centerpiece. As they left the greenhouse, Olivia glanced back at the blue roses. They represented more than horticultural achievement now. They were a symbol of the transformation happening within the Whitmore household, and within her own life, but like any hybrid bloom. Their beauty came with vulnerability. She couldn't shake the feeling that Diane posed a threat to everything blossoming here. The day before the party, Olivia worked late, finalizing arrangements for the garden displays. The caterers would arrive early the next morning, and everything needed to be perfect. Not just for Caleb, but for Michael, who had poured his hopes for a fresh start into this celebration. As she was locking the greenhouse, a movement near the house caught her eye. Diane stood on the terrace, watching her. After a moment's hesitation, Olivia approached, steeling herself for another confrontation. Working overtime? Diane asked, her tone surprisingly conversational. Just finishing up, Olivia replied cautiously. Everything needs to be ready for tomorrow. Yes, the big day. Diane swirled a glass of amber liquid. Whiskey, Olivia guessed. My brother has become quite invested in this party. In you, as well. There it was, the veiled hostility barely concealed beneath polite observation. I'm just doing my job, Olivia said, the same response she'd given many times before. Are you? Diane's smile didn't reach her eyes. I wonder what your actual job is here, Olivia. Gardener, nanny, or perhaps something more intimate. Heat rushed to Olivia's cheeks. That's inappropriate. Is it? I've seen how Michael looks at you, how Caleb clings to you. Diane's voice hardened. You've made yourself quite indispensable in a remarkably short time. I care about them, Olivia said simply. Is that so hard to believe? What I find hard to believe, Diane countered, is that a simple florist would take such interest in old family matters, financial records, Emma's accident, Julia Harper. Olivia's mouth went dry. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Diane set her glass down on the stone balustrade. You've been searching for something since you arrived. I want to know what it is. I told you, Julia Harper was my mother. So, you claim, yet you've provided no proof of this connection. I don't need to prove anything to you, Olivia said, anger finally breaking through her caution. What I need is to understand what happened to my mother after she left this house pregnant and afraid. Diane's expression remained impassive. And you think I have those answers? I think you know more than you're saying. About my mother. About Emma's accident. Something dangerous flickered in Diane's eyes. Careful, Olivia. You're making accusations you can't substantiate. I found Emma's financial records, Olivia said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. The ones documenting your embezzlement from the foundation? For the first time, genuine alarm crossed Diane's features. You're bluffing. I'm not. She was going to expose you the day she died, and Caleb saw you tampering with her car that morning. The color drained from Diane's face, quickly replaced by a cold fury that made Olivia step back involuntarily. You've been filling that child's head with lies, Diane hissed, manipulating a traumatized boy to further your agenda. Caleb remembered on his own, Olivia countered. Though fear was beginning to outweigh her anger, she'd revealed too much, played her hand too soon. Diane stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Listen to me very carefully. You will say nothing of this to Michael. You will pack your things and leave this estate before the party tomorrow. If you don't, I will ensure that both you and your ailing grandmother face consequences you cannot imagine. Are you threatening me? Olivia asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. I'm giving you one chance to walk away, Diane replied. More than I gave your mother. The implication hit Olivia like a physical blow. What did you do to her? But Diane had already turned away, moving back toward the house. One more thing, she called over her shoulder. Those blue roses you're so proud of, I wouldn't display them tomorrow if I were you. Some things, once exposed to light, tend to wither and die. As Diane disappeared into the house, Olivia stood frozen, her mind racing with both fear and fury. The threat had been explicit: leave or face consequences. But leaving would mean abandoning Caleb and Michael to Diane's manipulation and potential violence. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands, scrolling to Michael's number. The right thing would be to call him now, to tell him everything, despite the risk. But what if Diane was monitoring his calls? What if warning him put him in immediate danger? Instead, she texted Mrs. Hayes, "Need to speak with you urgently. Meet me at the greenhouse in 10 minutes. Tell no one." As she waited in the gathering dusk, Olivia made a decision. She would not run. Tomorrow, at the party with witnesses present, she would reveal everything: the financial records, Caleb's testimony, her own suspicions about her mother's fate. It was a gamble, but it was the only way to protect those she had come to care for deeply. In the quiet greenhouse, surrounded by the impossible blue roses she had cultivated, Olivia felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever happened tomorrow would change everything, for better or for worse. The morning of Caleb's birthday dawned clear and bright, with just enough breeze to carry the garden's fragrance across the estate. Olivia had barely slept, spending most of the night finalizing her plan with Mrs. Hayes. The elderly housekeeper had confirmed what Olivia already suspected. Diane couldn't be trusted, and Michael needed to know the truth before something terrible happened. "She's capable of worse than you know," Mrs. Hayes had whispered in the greenhouse, her weathered face lined with fear. "The night Julia disappeared, I heard shouting from the east wing. The next morning, there was blood on the kitchen steps." Now, as caterers bustled around the garden, setting up tables and decorations, Olivia watched from the greenhouse where she was preparing the centerpieces. Despite Diane's veiled threat, she had decided to showcase the blue roses, not just as a birthday surprise for Caleb, but as a symbol of her refusal to be intimidated. "They're beautiful," Michael said, appearing in the doorway in a light summer suit that complemented his silver-streaked hair. He looked relaxed and younger than she'd ever seen him. "Caleb's going to be thrilled." "I hope so," Olivia replied, cursing the tremor in her voice. She hadn't told Michael about Diane's threats. Deciding it would be safer to reveal everything during the party when others were present, he stepped closer, concern crossing his features. "Are you all right? You seem tense." "Just nervous about the party," she half lied, focusing on arranging the blue roses in crystal vases. "A lot of important people will be here. None more important than you," Michael said quietly, placing a hand over hers. "Olivia, I know things have been complicated between us since that day on the terrace, but I want you to know." "There you are." Diane's voice cut through the moment like a blade. She stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a pale blue suit that probably cost more than Olivia's annual income. "The first guests are arriving, Michael. You should be greeting them, not hiding in the greenhouse." Her gaze fell on the blue roses, and a cold smile touched her lips. "How unusual," she commented, "though perhaps not the best choice for a child's party. They look rather artificial, don't they?" Michael frowned at his sister. "I think they're extraordinary. Caleb specifically requested them." "Of course he did," Diane murmured, her eyes never leaving Olivia's. "Children are so easily influenced." The implication hung in the air between them. "I'll finish these and bring them out," Olivia said, breaking the tense silence. "You should both go greet your guests." After they left, Michael with evident reluctance, Diane with a final warning glance, Olivia leaned against the workbench, her heart racing. The confrontation would happen today, one way or another. She just needed to choose the right moment. By noon, the garden was filled with guests, board members in expensive summer attire, their children running across the newly laid lawns, caterers weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. At the center of it all stood Caleb, beaming in a new suit as he accepted gifts and congratulations with growing confidence. The blue roses had been placed on every table. Drawing admiration and curious questions from the guests, Olivia noticed Diane watching them with narrowed eyes, as if expecting the blooms to somehow betray her. "It's time for the cake," Mrs. Hayes announced, signaling to the catering staff. Everyone gathered around the main table where an elaborate cake had been set up, a gardening theme, with sugar flowers cascading down 3 tiers and a miniature Caleb figure tending them. The boy's eyes widened with delight when he saw it. As the guests sang, "Happy Birthday," Olivia positioned herself near Michael, the metal box containing Emma's financial records concealed in a tote bag at her feet. She had decided to wait until after the cake cutting to approach him privately, to show him the evidence before making any public accusations. Caleb blew out his candles to enthusiastic applause, then looked up at his father. "Can I make a speech?" he asked, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly hushed gathering. Michael looked startled but pleased. "Of course, buddy." The boy stood on his chair, suddenly seeming older than his 9 years. "Thank you all for coming to my party," he began, his voice gaining strength with each word. 3 years ago, when my mom died, I thought I'd never be happy again. I stopped talking because there were scary things I didn't know how to say." A murmur ran through the crowd. Many of the guests were clearly surprised to hear Caleb speaking at all, having grown accustomed to his silence. But then Olivia came, he continued, turning to smile at her. "She made our garden beautiful again. She made me feel safe enough to talk again, and she grew impossible blue roses because I asked her to." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes as Michael's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "So I want to say thank you to Olivia," Caleb concluded, "and I want to give her a present, even though it's my birthday." He jumped down from his chair and approached Olivia, holding out a small, clumsily wrapped package. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a framed photograph, Emma holding infant Caleb, her smile radiant. "Mom would have liked you," the boy said simply. "I know she would." The moment was so pure, so genuine, that Olivia almost missed the movement at the edge of the crowd. Diane was slipping away, heading toward the house with purpose in her stride. "Thank you," Olivia said to Caleb, hugging him quickly before turning to Michael. "I need to speak with you," she whispered urgently. "It's about Diane and Emma." His expression shifted from joy to concern. "What about them?" Before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the dessert table. One of the board members, an elderly man Olivia recognized from photographs as James Harrington, the foundation's chairman, was clutching his throat, his face turning an alarming shade of red. "He's choking," someone shouted. "No!" the man gasped, sinking to his knees. Allergic reaction, panic swept through the party. "Does anyone have an EpiPen?" Michael called, rushing to Harrington's side. As the crisis unfolded, Olivia realized with horror what was happening. This was no accident. It was a diversion. She scanned the crowd for Diane but couldn't find her. "Mrs. Hayes?" she called to the housekeeper, who was hurrying past with a glass of water. "Where's Diane?" "I saw her heading to the kitchen," Mrs. Hayes replied, her eyes widening with understanding. "The drinks for the toast. She insisted on handling them herself." Olivia's blood ran cold. The champagne toast for Caleb's birthday was scheduled to follow the cake cutting, a special non-alcoholic version for the birthday boy, personally prepared by his aunt. Without hesitation, Olivia pushed through the crowd, which was now focused on Harrington as he received an injection from someone's emergency kit. She sprinted toward the house, praying she wasn't too late. In the kitchen, she found what she feared. Diane stood at the counter, carefully adding clear liquid from a small vial to a single flute of sparkling cider. "What are you doing?" Olivia demanded, her voice echoing in the empty kitchen. Diane whirled around, surprise quickly masked by cold composure. "Preparing my nephew's birthday toast," she replied smoothly, "though I don't recall inviting you into the house." "What did you put in that drink?" Olivia asked, edging closer to the counter. "A touch of sweetener," Diane said, recapping the vial and slipping it into her pocket. "Caleb likes his cider on the sweeter side, like Mr. Harrington likes shellfish in his dessert," Olivia challenged. "I saw you distract everyone with that allergic reaction. Was that your plan? Create chaos so you could poison Caleb without anyone noticing?" Diane's mask of civility slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "You have quite an imagination. Perhaps that's why my nephew is so fond of you. Children do love fairy tales." "This isn't a fairy tale," Olivia said, her hand inching toward the tainted flute. "This is attempted murder. First Emma, now Caleb." "You understand nothing," Diane hissed. all pretense abandoned. Everything I've done has been to protect this family's legacy. Emma was going to destroy us with her self-righteous crusade. And you're just like her, digging where you don't belong. And Caleb, what threat does a 9-year-old boy pose to the Whitmore legacy? Diane's eyes glittered with a hatred that made Olivia step back involuntarily. As long as he lives, the controlling interest in the company remains in trust. Michael is merely a caretaker, but with Caleb gone and you conveniently blamed for his death, the implication was clear. Michael would inherit control, and Diane would continue to manipulate her brother as she had for years. "You won't get away with this," Olivia said, lunging for the flute. "I have Emma's records. I know about the embezzlement." Diane moved with surprising speed, grabbing Olivia's wrist in a painful grip. "You'll never get the chance to share them," she snarled, using her free hand to retrieve something from her jacket pocket, a small revolver, its pearl handle incongruously delicate in her manicured hand. "Diane." Michael's voice, horrified, came from the doorway. He stood frozen, staring at the scene before him, his sister holding a gun on the woman he had come to care for. "Michael," Diane's voice instantly softened, though she kept the gun trained on Olivia. "Thank goodness you're here. I caught her adding something to Caleb's drink." "That's not true," Olivia said, her eyes locked on Michael's. "She was poisoning it, just like she sabotaged Emma's car, just like she did something terrible to my mother. Julia Harper." At the mention of Julia's name, something shifted in Michael's expression. Recognition, then dawning horror as the pieces fell into place. "Enough," Diane shouted, her composure fracturing completely. "I did what had to be done. Emma was going to ruin everything with her accusations. Julia was going to expose our relationship to the board. Can you imagine the scandal? And you," she turned back to Olivia, "you're just like them, always in the way." "Put the gun down, Diane," Michael said, his voice steady despite the shock evident on his face. "You don't understand," his sister pleaded. "I've protected you all these years, made the hard decisions you couldn't make. Everything I did was for us, for the Whitmore name. What did you do to Julia Harper?" Michael demanded, taking a careful step forward. Diane laughed, a brittle sound with no humor in it. "Julia Harper got exactly what she deserved for threatening to expose us. And now her daughter will join her." The gun swung toward Olivia's heart. "No!" Michael lunged forward as Diane pulled the trigger, throwing himself between them. The gunshot echoed through the kitchen, followed by screams from the garden as guests reacted to the sound. Michael staggered backward into Olivia's arms, blood blooming across his chest like a macabre flower. As they fell to the floor together, Olivia heard running footsteps and shouts. Through a haze of shock, she was dimly aware of security staff tackling Diane, of Mrs. Hayes rushing in with a phone to her ear, calling for an ambulance. But all she could focus on was Michael's face, growing paler by the second as his life leaked out onto the pristine kitchen tiles. "Stay with me," she pleaded, pressing her hands against the wound. "Please, Michael, stay with me." His eyes, clouded with pain, found hers. "Julia," he whispered, "I should have protected her, protected you," as sirens wailed in the distance. Olivia held the man who might have loved her mother, who had taken a bullet to save her life, and prayed it wasn't too late for either of them. The waiting room of Willow Creek Memorial Hospital smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Olivia sat rigidly in an uncomfortable chair, her clothes still stained with Michael's blood despite her attempts to clean up in the hospital bathroom. Beside her, Caleb leaned against her shoulder, having refused to leave her side since the chaos at the mansion. 6 hours had passed since Michael was rushed into emergency surgery. 6 hours of uncertainty, of prayers whispered into sterile air, of police officers coming and going with questions about Diane, who was now in custody. "Ms. Reed," a detective approached, notebook in hand. "I have a few more questions if you don't mind." Olivia glanced down at Caleb, whose eyes were finally closed in exhausted sleep. "Can it wait? He's just fallen asleep." The detective, Sanders, according to his badge, nodded sympathetically. "Actually, it might be better to speak privately." He gestured toward Mrs. Hayes, who sat across the room clutching a rosary. Perhaps she could watch him. After transferring Caleb to Mrs. Hayes's care, Olivia followed the detective to a small consultation room. "Ms. Whitmore has made some interesting claims," Sanders began, consulting his notes. She says you've been manipulating Mr. Whitmore and his son, that you planted evidence against her. That's absurd, Olivia replied, too tired for diplomacy. She tried to poison her own nephew after years of embezzling from the family foundation. When I caught her, she shot her brother. We have the gun with her fingerprints and multiple witnesses to the shooting, Sanders acknowledged. What we're trying to establish is motive, miss. Whitmore claims you've been making false accusations about her involvement in Emma Whitmore's death 3 years ago. Olivia took a deep breath. They weren't false accusations. Caleb saw Diane tampering with Emma's car the morning of the accident, and Emma had discovered financial irregularities in the foundation accounts. She was planning to expose Diane the day she died. You have evidence of this? Yes, a metal box containing Emma's financial records. It's in my apartment. She gave him the address and keys. There's more. I believe Diane may have been involved in the disappearance of a woman named Julia Harper, about 25 years ago. Julia was my mother. The detective's eyebrows rose. That's a serious allegation. Just before she shot Michael, Diane said something about my mother, getting what she deserved for threatening to expose them. I think she may have. Olivia couldn't finish the sentence, the possibility too painful to vocalize. Sanders made a note. We'll look into it. In the meantime, I should inform you that Mrs. Whitmore is being charged with attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. Depending on Mr. Whitmore's condition, those charges may be upgraded. The clinical language made Olivia flinch. Michael wasn't just a potential homicide case. He was a man who had stepped in front of a bullet for her, a father whose son was now sleeping fitfully in a hospital waiting room after the detective left. Olivia returned to find Caleb awake, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. Is Dad going to die? He asked directly, his voice small but steady. Olivia sat beside him, taking his hand in hers. The doctors are doing everything they can, she said, refusing to offer false reassurances. Your dad is very strong, Caleb nodded, seeming to appreciate her honesty. I told another policeman what I saw, about Aunt Diane under Mom's car. His voice dropped to a whisper. It was my fault. If I'd told someone back then. No, Olivia said firmly, turning to face him fully. Listen to me, Caleb. None of this is your fault. You were 5 years old and traumatized. Diane is the only one responsible for her actions. The boy looked unconvinced. But if I'd been braver... You are brave, Olivia interrupted. So brave. You started talking again even though it was scary. You showed me your mother's journal. You spoke in front of all those people today. She squeezed his hand. Your father is going to be so proud when he wakes up. When, not if, she had to believe that. Family of Michael Whitmore. A surgeon appeared in the doorway, still wearing scrubs. Olivia and Caleb stood simultaneously, Mrs. Hayes joining them as they approached the doctor. The bullet missed his heart by centimeters, the surgeon explained, her face revealing nothing. But it caused significant damage to surrounding tissue and blood vessels. We've repaired what we could, but he lost a lot of blood. The next 24 hours will be critical. Can we see him? Caleb asked, his voice stronger than Olivia expected. The surgeon's professional demeanor softened slightly. He's in recovery now, one visitor at a time, and only for a few minutes. He's heavily sedated and won't be conscious. You should go first, Olivia told Caleb. He needs to hear your voice. As Mrs. Hayes accompanied the boy to the recovery room, Olivia sank back into her chair, the adrenaline that had sustained her finally ebbing away. Exhaustion claimed her, and she drifted into a fitful sleep filled with fragmented dreams, blue roses wilting into blood-soaked earth, Diane's face twisted with rage, and strangely, a younger Emma Whitmore walking through the mansion garden with a dark-haired woman Olivia somehow knew was her mother. She awoke to gentle shaking. Mrs. Hayes stood over her, concern etched in the lines of her face. What time is it? Olivia asked, disoriented. Just after 5 a.m. They've moved Mr. Whitmore to ICU. He's stable for now. And Caleb, asleep in the family waiting room, the nurses made up a cot for him. Mrs. Hayes hesitated. There's something else, the police called. They found something at your apartment. While retrieving the metal box, they'd like you to come to the station. Alarm jolted Olivia fully awake. Did they say what it was? Only that it concerns Julia Harper. The police station was quiet at that early hour. Detective Sanders met her in an interview room, placing a plastic evidence bag on the table between them. Inside was a faded Polaroid photograph Olivia had never seen before. This was hidden inside the metal box, Sanders explained. In a false bottom we discovered when cataloging the evidence. With trembling hands, Olivia examined the photo through the plastic. It showed 3 people in the Whitmore garden, a much younger Michael, a beautiful woman who must be Emma, and between them, a slender, dark-haired woman with Olivia's eyes and smile. "My mother," she whispered. "There's an inscription on the back," Sanders said. Turning the bag over, in neat handwriting were the words, "Michael, Emma, and Julia, June 1999, our secret garden." "We've also located hospital records," Sanders continued. "Julia Harper was admitted to Riverside General in December 1999 with severe injuries consistent with assault. She was approximately 3 months pregnant at the time." Olivia felt sick. "Did the records say what happened to her?" "She claimed she fell downstairs, but the attending physician noted suspicions of domestic violence. She left against medical advice after 2 days. There's no further record of her in the system." "So she survived," Olivia said, hope and sorrow intermingling. "At least initially," Sanders nodded. "We've also found something else of interest. Emma Whitmore's original autopsy report noted anomalies inconsistent with a simple car accident, traces of a sedative in her bloodstream not prescribed by her doctor. Diane drugged her before she left that day," Olivia realized, "to make sure the sabotage would work. It appears so. We're reopening the investigation into Mrs. Whitmore's death." Sanders paused. "There's one more thing," Caleb's statement. "He mentioned something this morning that he didn't tell you or the other officers." Olivia braced herself. "What was it?" "He said that the day his mother died, he overheard Diane on the phone saying, 'It worked once with Julia. It will work again with Emma.' Does that mean anything to you?" The implication hit Olivia like a physical blow. "Diane didn't just hurt my mother. She tried to kill her the same way she killed Emma." Sanders nodded grimly. "We're looking into it. In the meantime, Mrs. Reed, I suggest you return to the hospital. The doctors called while you were on your way here. Mr. Whitmore is showing signs of regaining consciousness." Michael's face was ashen against the white hospital sheets, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines that beeped and hummed in the background. Caleb sat beside the bed, holding his father's hand, speaking softly about the blue roses and how everyone at the party had admired them. When Olivia entered, the boy looked up with the ghost of a smile. "His fingers moved," he reported. "The nurse said that's a good sign." She nodded, taking a position on the opposite side of the bed. Michael's breathing seemed slightly stronger than she expected, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. "I was telling Dad about the roses," Caleb explained, "and about how you saved me from Aunt Diane." "We saved each other," Olivia corrected gently, as if responding to their voices. Michael's eyelids fluttered. Caleb leaned forward eagerly, squeezing his father's hand. "Dad, can you hear me?" For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then Michael's eyes opened, unfocused at first before finding his son's face. "Caleb," he whispered, the word barely audible. "I'm here." "Dad," the boy said, tears spilling freely now. "Olivia's here too." Michael's gaze shifted to her, recognition and relief flooding his expression. "You're safe," he managed. "Thanks to you," she replied, her own vision blurring with tears. His free hand moved weakly across the blanket, reaching for hers. When their fingers connected, he squeezed with surprising strength. "Julia," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. Should have protected." "It's okay," Olivia soothed, though her heart raced at the confirmation of what she'd begun to suspect. Michael had known her mother, perhaps even cared for her. "We can talk about it when you're stronger." He shook his head slightly, determination evident despite his weakness. "Need to tell you. The diary. Emma's diary. I've read it." "No," he persisted. "The missing page, in my office. Safe." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Whitmore needs to rest now. You can come back in a few hours." As they reluctantly prepared to leave, Michael tightened his grip on Olivia's hand. "Promise me," he whispered urgently. "Find it. I promise," she assured him, though she had no idea what she was looking for beyond a torn diary page. In the hallway, Caleb looked up at her with renewed hope. "He's going to be okay, isn't he?" Olivia pulled the boy into a hug. allowing herself to believe for the first time since the gunshot rang out that perhaps everything might indeed be okay. But as they walked toward the hospital cafeteria, Michael's words echoed in her mind. What secret had been so important that Emma tore it from her diary? And why, after all these years, was Michael so desperate for Olivia to find it? 5 years passed like the seasons in the garden, inevitable cycles of growth, bloom, and renewal. Olivia stood at the window of her small office at Willow Creek Botanical Research Center, watching spring rain nourish the experimental gardens below. Her work on breeding blue roses had earned her recognition in horticultural circles, eventually leading to a research position and the opportunity to complete her long-abandoned degree. On her desk sat a dried blue rose in a glass dome, the first successful bloom from that fateful summer, preserved as a reminder of how the impossible could become possible. Beside it was a framed photograph of her mother, recovered from Michael's safe along with the torn diary page that had revealed the final piece of the puzzle. Emma's last journal entry, written the day before her death, had explained everything. I've found proof that Diane tried to kill Julia when she discovered their affair, the car accident on Ridgeway Pass. The same one Diane is now threatening me with if I expose the embezzlement. Julia survived, but Diane forced her to leave town, threatening to hurt her baby if she ever returned. The baby that might be Michael's. I have to tell him the truth, even if it destroys his world. Some truths are worth the pain they cause. The truth had indeed caused pain, but also healing. Diane's trial had revealed decades of manipulation and criminal activity. She was currently serving 20 years for Emma's murder, the attempted murder of Caleb, and the assault on Michael. She had never confessed to harming Julia Harper, but investigators had found enough evidence to establish that she had run Julia's car off the road in a deliberate echo of what she would later do to Emma. As for Julia herself, Olivia had finally learned the full story. Her mother had fled to her grandmother's home in Willow Creek, giving birth to Olivia before succumbing to complications from her earlier injuries. She had died believing it was the only way to keep her daughter safe from Diane's reach. A knock on her office door interrupted her reflections. "Package for you, Dr. Reed," her assistant said, handing over a small box. Inside was a blue rose corsage and a note in familiar handwriting. "Don't forget, dinner at 7. Caleb's dying to tell you about his college acceptance letters." Olivia smiled, tucking the note into her pocket. 5 years had changed so much. Michael had recovered slowly from his injuries, regaining his strength as Diane's trial unfolded. Their relationship had evolved cautiously, both aware of the complicated history that connected them. The possibility that he might be her biological father had loomed over them briefly, until DNA testing had ruled it out. Julia's baby had been fathered by a man she'd been seeing before coming to work at the Whitmore estate. That revelation had freed them to explore their feelings for each other without the shadow of taboo. Michael had supported her educational pursuits while rebuilding the Whitmore Foundation's reputation. Caleb had blossomed into a thoughtful teenager with his mother's artistic talents and a newfound passion for environmental science inspired by Olivia's work. They had become a family, not through blood, but through the stronger bonds of shared experience and chosen love. As Olivia gathered her things to leave, her phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. "Hurry home. Big surprise waiting." Home. The word still sometimes caught her by surprise. After years of renting her small apartment above the flower shop, home was now the Whitmore estate, renovated and brightened, its dark corners open to light, its gardens more magnificent than ever. When she arrived, Caleb was waiting on the front steps, now nearly as tall as she was at 14. His resemblance to Emma grew stronger each year, though his personality combined his mother's warmth with his father's quiet determination. "You're late," he accused good-naturedly, taking her bag. "Some of us have to work for a living," she teased back, following him inside. "Dad's in the garden," Caleb said, a hint of conspiracy in his voice. "He said to meet him there when you arrived." The garden in May was spectacular, a testament to their shared vision and years of care. The rose bushes that had once been skeletal were now lush and heavy with blooms of every color, including the special blue variety that had become the estate's signature. Michael stood by the central fountain, looking more relaxed and content than she could have imagined during those first tense meetings 5 years ago. The silver in his hair had increased, and fine lines framed his eyes, but he carried himself with the ease of a man at peace with his life. "There you are," he smiled, taking her hand as she approached. "How was your day, Dr. Reed?" "Productive," she replied, leaning up to kiss him briefly. "We're making progress on the drought-resistant strain, but something tells me you didn't ask me to meet you out here to discuss botanical research." "Perceptive as always," he acknowledged. "Actually, I wanted to show you something." He led her to a newly installed bench near the gazebo, Emma's favorite spot. According to her diary, the bench was made of smooth white marble, with a simple inscription, in memory of Emma Whitmore and Julia Harper, whose courage and love continue to bloom in this garden. Emotion tightened Olivia's throat. "Michael, it's beautiful. It felt right to honor them both," he said quietly. "Without Emma's diary, we might never have known the truth. Without Julia's sacrifice, you wouldn't be here." Olivia touched the cool stone, tracing her mother's name with her fingertips. "I wish I could have known them." "You do know them," Michael said, taking her hand again. "Emma's strength is in Caleb, and Julia's spirit is in you. Her resilience, her capacity for nurturing life from the most unlikely places." He gestured to the blue roses surrounding them. "Just like these flowers that shouldn't exist but do." The parallel wasn't lost on her. These impossible blooms mirroring their improbable family. Born from tragedy but thriving nonetheless. "There's something else," Michael continued, suddenly looking nervous in a way she hadn't seen in years. "Something I've been wanting to ask you." Before he could continue, Caleb appeared on the path, carrying a small velvet box with exaggerated care. "You were supposed to wait for my signal," Michael sighed, though there was no real annoyance in his tone. "You were taking too long," the teenager replied with a shrug, handing over the box. Realization dawned on Olivia, as Michael took the box, and with a grace that belied his past injury, lowered himself to one knee before her. "Olivia Reed," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "5 years ago, you saved my life, not just by pulling me from that car wreck, but by bringing light back into my home, and hope back into my heart. You healed my son, restored this garden, and taught us both how to live again." He opened the box to reveal a ring with a square-cut sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds, the exact shade of the blue roses that had become their symbol. "This family is already yours in every way that matters," he continued, "but I'd be honored if you would make it official. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Olivia was transported back to that first day, standing awkwardly in the mansion's grand foyer, covered in soot and blood, wondering how she'd ended up in this unlikely place. The journey from that moment to this one had been filled with danger and discovery, pain and healing, loss and love. "Yes," she said simply, the certainty in her heart leaving no room for hesitation. As Michael slipped the ring onto her finger, Caleb whooped with delight, any pretense of teenage coolness abandoned in his genuine happiness. Later, as the three of them celebrated over dinner in the same dining room where Olivia had once felt so out of place, she found herself marveling at how completely her life had transformed. The mystery of her mother's past had been solved, though the loss would always remain. The danger Diane posed was contained, her poison no longer able to reach them, and in place of the questions and fears that had once driven her, Olivia had found answers and peace. In the garden beyond the windows, dusk settled over the blue roses, botanical anomalies that defied conventional wisdom, just as the family gathered around the table defied conventional definitions. Their roots weren't tied by blood, but by choice, by shared history, and by a love that had proven strong enough to overcome the darkest secrets and the most determined efforts to destroy it. As Michael raised his glass in a toast to their future, Olivia glimpsed movement near the garden's edge, perhaps just the evening breeze through the flowers. But for a moment, she could have sworn she saw 2 women walking arm in arm among the blue roses, their faces peaceful, their smiles approving. Sometimes, she thought, the strongest roots are invisible, like the love that had brought them all together in this once fractured, now healing home.